Do you know how much you work? Like hours-wise? Have you ever thought about this? If you think about it, if you thought about how much you're going to work in a lifetime? Has anyone ever done this terrible thing? No? Okay, well, here we go. We'll start with this, and I'll make the math easier. So if we took an average person's working life and say they work for about 40 years, say the average is 40 hours a week. Again, this is going to vary for everybody, but over 52 weeks out of the year, it's 2,080 hours per year. Over 40 years, that's 83,200 hours. That's roughly 10,000 full working days. Have you ever thought about how much that is? Now again, this is an average. This is Western culture. This is dependent on your life situation, depending on where you're at. This is different for the world, but for us, we can spend most of our life working. Here's where it lands. If we go to the next slide. This is more hours than you'll spend with your children, more hours than you'll spend with your spouse, more hours than you'll spend sleeping if you count only working years, and more hours than everything else you'd call meaningful. You ever thought about that? Now again, the context is different. For some of you, your work actually looks like parenting. And so your work is combined with spending time with your kids. Maybe you homeschool. This also takes into consideration, or the equivalent would be, what happens when we're between jobs, when we're out of work. There might be long seasons of that. There might be short seasons of that. And you might actually find yourself spending more time with family or doing the things that you would call meaningful. But very quickly, as we have this conversation, what can tend to happen is we start thinking about, man, that's a lot of hours working and not doing the things that we find most meaningful. What if those things aren't to be as separate as we tend to make them? What if those hours that we spend in work can also be some of the most meaningful hours that we could actually spend? What's interesting, when Gallup did their research, only 13% of workers globally feel engaged by their jobs. 63% are not engaged, checked out, sleepwalking, putting in the time, and the remaining 24% are actively disengaged, hating what they do. Anybody want to confess to what bracket they're in? This isn't just you. Your story of relating to your work, whether you love it, whether you hate it, whether you have it, whether you don't, this is literally the story of all humanity. And it varies globally, it varies by city, it varies by family, but 90% of adults spend half their waking lives doing things they would rather not be doing at places they would rather not be. 90%. That is so much time and so much of your and my life. Bonnie Ware, she actually spent a lot of time with those who are on respite care, who were, on their way out. And she wrote a memoir of all the experiences that she had. And she actually ended up categorizing the top 5 regrets that those have on their deathbed. And the number 2 regret was, I wish I wouldn't have worked as much. I wish I wouldn't have worked as much. Now, that didn't mean, man, I wish I would have done better. I wish I would have worked harder. I wish I would have made more. I wish I wouldn't have worked as much. Do you also wonder what the number 1 is? That's what I thought when I read that one. The number 1 is that I wish I was more courageous in being who I am to be and not who I thought others needed me to be. What if I was actually more authentic? What if I wasn't swayed by others and by culture so much and I stayed true to who I am and did the things that I sense God calling me to? So what we're going to do over the next 4 weeks, doing a series called Money Matters, Monday Matters, and actually want to look at the ways in which we can correlate our faith with our work. If we're going to spend that much time there, if we're going to spend time working, why would it be separate from our life with God? Why would God not care deeply about our work, how we spend Monday to Friday? Because very quickly what can happen is we can think of, well, I go do my job over here, and then maybe I'm thinking so that I can do cool things like ministry and help people and care for others and things like that. Or, man, religious jobs, those are the jobs that God likes, and I'm just going to do this one over here to help support that. Like, there's this whole sacred and secular divide that has crept in that actually I think has robbed just the everyday work that people find themselves in. Like, sitting in this room right now, there's a vast array of different types of work, and I'm going to offer to you that God cares about every single one of them. And if you're here and you're exploring faith, or you're not a Christian, you're not sure what to make of Jesus, whatever it is, I would offer that what we're going to look at today will help make meaning of your work. So that when you spend all of those hours, when you spend most of your life working or relating to work or thinking about work, whatever it is, that it could be something that is fulfilling and meaningful, and that you can participate fully in furthering the kingdom of God here on earth. That it can actually be something that is supporting and furthering the moral fabric of our culture, bringing peace and unity. And so these are topics for the next few weeks. Today, Monday matters more than you've been told. Even when it's broken, we'll get there next week. Like, why does work not work all the time? We don't like it. We don't like those we work with. We have those feelings on Sunday nights of work's about to start tomorrow, and I don't like that feeling. Or like, how quickly can I just get to Saturday? I just need to like bear down for those days. Like, why is work broken? Why is it the way that it is when we oftentimes relate to it? Can it be better? The other one, but not more than you, and work like it's true. So not more than you. Like, what if you actually matter more than identifying with your job? And how would that actually change the way that we participate in Monday to Fridays? So the question this morning, why? Why does something we give so much of our lives to so often give us little back? There's 3 stories that we could find ourselves in. Many have, as they study this, they'll repeat these back to us. The first one is the achievement story. This says that work is about proving yourself, making a name, climbing the ladder, and tying your worth to your success. That why I show up to work, why I put these hours in, is that I can achieve something. I can make something happen. I can find a sense of dignity and credibility in and through my work. The second one, the paycheck story. This says work is a necessary evil, something you have to do to fund your real life somewhere else, survive the week to get to the weekend. Like, I just need to make money. I got to put food on the table, roof over my head, and if I can make more of it, the better things will be. Third one, the self-fulfillment story. This says you need to find the perfect job that makes you happy and matches your passions. If you're not fulfilled, you're in the wrong job. So therefore, my job is always letting me down. And if I could just move to this job, if I could just do this job, if I can find a job that gives me this instead, over and over again, we can just chase fulfillment in and through our job, and in through our career, and in through our vocation, and continue to spin the wheel, trying to find significance. Now, here's the reality. These 3 in and of themselves are not like evil. They're not horrible. You know what's good? Is to have an income based on job. You know what's good is to like what you do and achieve something, to put your hand to something. You know what's good is to find a sense of fulfillment in that I'm contributing to something and participating in something. I'm co-laboring in something. So these in and of themselves are not bad. But I ask you this morning, which one of these might you relate to the most? Which one stands out to you of these 3 stories of why you work? Why you spend the time in which you do, why you put up with the things that you put up with, and what are you chasing in and through your work, and in through a job, and in through a career? At the end of the day, these stories keep falling short. Not one of these will completely sustain us or fulfill us in a season. They will fall short. And we will continue to look and seek elsewhere and almost avoid or try to quickly get done with work. This idea of like retirement in Western culture, you know where it's not present? In the scriptures. You know where it's not present? In like most of the globe. So now we have to just put up with something as fast as possible so that I could then put my feet up and lay back. Can I just get through this? Can I suffer my way through work? just so I can get to the good times, the good days. But you know, like where like people decline in life is when they have no job after the job that they've had. Isn't that interesting? That work actually provides meaning, putting your hand to something, paid or unpaid at that point. But you're contributing, you're a part of something, you're actually working. That is a great way for those to remain in mental and physical health throughout their years. But on this side of things, when I'm like hitting 40 soon, the thought's like, oh gosh, retirement can't come soon enough. And you just want to like do trips and hang out and do nothing. And yet the scriptures and most of the globe do not have an imagination for that. And so a part of why they keep failing, these stories, is that we are trying to ask too much of these stories, our work. We're actually putting all of our identity, we're looking for ultimate security, and we're trying to find ultimate meaning in the work that we do. Your work was not designed to offer you those things. Your work is not to hold up who you are. Though usually in conversation, when you meet someone new, the first thing you get to is, what do you do? And now I can better understand who this person is by what they do. And all of a sudden we become what we do, don't we? Don't we? But isn't that not true? Like, you know this. You are not your work, but quickly we fall into it. Tim Keller says, if the point of work is to serve and exalt ourselves, then our work inevitably becomes less about the work and more about us. Our aggressiveness will eventually become abuse, our drive will become burnout, and our self-sufficiency will become self-loathing. That if work is the place in which we are trying to find ourselves and take everything that we can from it for ourselves, it will run dry. It will run dry. And so here's what I'm suggesting this morning, that we actually look at a different story. We look at one that's older. We look at one that has stood the test of time. It's older than any self-help and any of our little work hack books that we like to read now to find more meaning in what we do. It's older than climbing any career ladder, even the Industrial Revolution. And we're going to go all the way back to the beginning. Areth read our central text earlier, but what would be helpful is to go all the way back to the opening pages of a Bible. If you don't have a Bible and you would like one, we have a gift for you. You can raise your hand and we'll walk that to you. This text will also be up on the screen. But we're going to start in Genesis 1:2. So the very beginning. In verse 2, it says, now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. This formless and empty, tohu avohu, would be this idea that something is just chaos. There's nothing to it. There's a nothingness happening. And yet it's in that nothingness, in that disordered chaos, that God's Spirit is on. This actually helps us make sense of the creation narrative. I know on this side of the Enlightenment, we look at it and we try to understand like how long has the earth existed and what about dinosaurs, and we do things like that. But the author of Genesis is not doing that. The author in Genesis is inviting us into, like many great stories do, the beginning. And this is how it all starts. And what they're helping also signify against other cultures of that time is how things actually started. That there is a creator, that there is a God, that there is one who is bringing order to chaos. And it would come in contrast of even the Babylonian way of understanding the beginning of things. That it actually came out of war. That there was actually destruction happening, and it was the leftovers of a God's body essentially that then built the earth, and it built things for us to live in. And so very quickly we get a better idea that God made the world not as a warrior digs a trench, but as an artist that makes a masterpiece. So very quickly we can see work in who God is. That from the very beginning, he is one that is putting his hands to something, that he is working. He continues in Genesis 1:3-25. I'm not going to read all of them, but the pattern here, if we walk through the first things that God starts to build, we see in verse 3, let there be light, and there was light. And God said, let there be a vault between the waters to separate water from water. And then God said, let the water in the sky be gathered to one place, and let dry ground appear. What God actually starts to do, the way in which he creates, is he actually starts to separate. He actually starts to bring, again, order to chaos. And then what he does the next few days is then he starts to fill it. So if you watch the order, now we go into verse 14 on the next slide. And God said, let there be lights in the vault of the sky to separate the day from the night. And God said, let the water teem with living creatures and let birds fly above the earth across the vault of the sky. And God said, let the land produce living creatures according to their kinds. The pattern is that God is actually creating a structure for it to then be filled. And then what does he call it when he's done? Tov, good. Goes from tovu avohu to tov, shalom, peace. Everything is right. It has been made in its fullness. It is good. Keller says that God made the world to need work. He made it such that even he had to work for it to become what he designed it to be, to bring forth all its riches and potential. It's not just functional. It's not just useful. It's inherently and originally good. Work produced goodness at every stage. And then we see in Genesis 2:1-3, by the seventh day, God had finished the work he had been doing. So on the seventh day, he rested from all his work. Then God blessed the seventh day and made it holy because on it he rested from all the work of creating that he had done. Joseph Piper says, leisure is not the absence of work, but an attitude of the soul in which you are able to contemplate and enjoy things as they are in themselves. We'll talk about it in a few weeks, but God rested from work. One of the greatest ways that you can find fulfillment and meaning in your work is to rest from it. How many vacation hours do you still have stacked in the bank and you haven't used this year? How do we find rest from the things that we put our hand to day in and day out? Yes, even parenting and kids. Like, how do we actually step into the trust that God has created and then he has rested so that he can enjoy the work that he has put his hand to? You will benefit more and do better work when you rest. I will do better work and benefit from it more. Therefore, others will also when I rest. Again, we'll talk about that more, so I'll stop there. But it is built into the way in which we are supposed to work. So, Ben Witherington III says, the potter is far from the only metaphor description as we see as God, is one of the ones in which he's talked about. He's also described as a metal worker, a garment maker, a dresser, a gardener, a farmer, a winemaker, a shepherd, a tent maker, a builder, an architect, musician, and composer. What this vast array of images of God as workers suggests is that God is involved in every aspect, every good aspect of life, and indeed is the inspirer and equipper of all good work. The implication is that there's no job, there is no work, there's no vocation in the room that does not have a divine analog. That there is something that has been created, there is a space that then there is to be filled. And then he says, let us make mankind in our image and our likeness so that they may rule, fill the earth, and subdue it. How does rule and subdue sound to you? In this cultural moment, we would maybe push back against, whoa, hold on, like we're supposed to be like kind and soft and gentle and meek, and to rule and subdue, to essentially enforce your will on something. But remember, if you know the narrative arc of the scriptures, is we haven't gotten to the what yet? To the sin, to the fall, to where death and destruction entered in. And so by design, guess what he is inviting his humanity to do? To subdue and to rule, to work. And if death and sin and separation and shame and guilt haven't entered in, then how good would that be? How good is that rule? How good is that subduing? And so we see him actually start to invite us into a certain pattern of work. One of the interesting things is that any of the Eastern cultures at that time, their gods, they would build statues to actually resemble their God for the people to associate with and understand. What does God do? He creates humanity. He creates his people, and he invites them in. We now become the ones that are representing God here on earth in the work that he has created, set up, and intends to continue. That we, unlike other cultures at that time, are being invited into the goodness in which God has created and to continue to build it. Genesis 2:15, the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and to take care of it. To work it and to take care of it. Abad, to serve, and to shamar, to keep and protect. These two movements in every good piece of work, making something and tending to what's being made. Making something and tending to what's been made. This is the invitation of God to his people. Work is not a part of the curse. Work is not a part of work is in the original design of the way in which God intended for things to be for the betterment of his people. It is a way in which we can actually live out the gifting and the calling that he's given us. It's a way that we can relate to him, that we can relate to his humanity. It is a part of caretaking of his people and his earth. Again, a Keller quote, farming takes the physical material of soil and seed and produces food. Music takes the physics of sound and rearranges it into something beautiful and thrilling. When we take an unformed mind and teach it a subject, whenever we bring order out of chaos, whenever we draw out creative potential, we are following God's pattern to creative cultural development. God is not distant from your work. He is not waiting for you to get off the clock so then you can start doing meaningful things. He is not trying to help you just get to a point of retirement so that you can finally feel like you could relax. Guess what? Troubles keep coming. If it's not your work, it's others. It does not like we just enter into some point of bliss all of a sudden because we're done with our work. He is wanting to work through you as you work through your work. He works, he creates, he fills, he rests, he makes things, tends to things, orders things, invites his image bearers to do the same. And then, when this God decides to actually enter into his humanity, we might expect him to arrive as a most dignified, noble, powerful person. But how does he come? If God came into the world, what would he be like? For the ancient Greeks, he might have been a philosopher king. The ancient Romans might have looked for just a noble statesman. But how does the God of the Hebrew come into the world? As a carpenter, as a tradesman. Some would argue the better translation is as a builder. You can imagine like a general contractor. God in the flesh had a job. Like he put in hours of doing something that would have maybe been thought of as lower class work. He took on flesh and he took on a job. Jesus would say often, I must work the works of the one who sent me while it is day. I am working the things that God is working. I am here to work. The village recognizes him as a carpenter. And it's the same hands that had a chisel holding all things together that we actually then turn to Colossians. That wasn't just the intro. We're almost to the end, I promise. But it's in Colossians that we read earlier. The Son is the image of God, of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For in him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, wherever thrones or powers or rulers or authorities, systems of the world, groupings of people, parts of society, places in which people work. All things have been created through him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. It is this carpenter that has entered humanity on behalf of God as the image of God to then demonstrate what it looks like for you and I to relate to God and his people. And so it's in Colossians that we start to see how things actually work. Synestemy is this idea of holding together. That it is a present, active participle, meaning that it's not just God created things to be held together. It's that in Jesus, he's actively holding things together now. What this changes is the idea that what's being held together right now is this church. And who's it being held together by? Thank God, not me. Because things would break quickly. Because things break. You know who's not holding your job together? You. You know what might disappear tomorrow? Your job. Like what do you do with that? Well, do you believe that it's your job holding all things together? Do you believe it's your work holding all things together? Do you believe it's you that's holding all things together? Or is it he that throughout all of time is holding all things together? He is working, and it's in our unique ways that we get to participate in that work. I don't know about you, but that helps me breathe a little bit more. Our work, a part of what we do here as a church, there's spaces that we try to gather in. This space is in escrow right now to be sold. Worst case scenario, within a month, like we're looking for another situation. We have not yet found that situation. You know what's easy for me to do? Is to just tear this city apart and find a solution for us, for me to hold it together. You know what I'm not doing? That. You know how weird it feels? Very weird. There's moments I feel like I'm failing. Like this is me in work. This is a job. Like there's a part of this. I love this. I'm glad I get to do it. There's still work involved. And so at the same time, I'm saying, God, I trust you with this. Yes, we have a realtor. Yes, we have people in this congregation that are stepping up and saying, let's go, let's do this. Yes, we're having conversations with other things. Yes, we're looking at the school districts. Yes, we're looking at Seventh-day Adventists. But yes, we're doing things. We're working. But it is not me nor us holding all of this together. And to be able to sleep at night, to be like, God, I don't want to lose sleep. Then I'm tired. Then I'm useless. Can you do this? Can it be out of you holding all things together that this will go, please? Soon? Or than later? We would all prefer that. So anyways, here we go. We're starting to wind down. Miroslav Volf, he says in his work in the Spirit, Volf actually argues that the church's greatest failure on work has been shrinking Christ's lordship to the private and spiritual sphere. He writes that if Christ is Lord of all, then Christ is Lord of all, the warehouse, the classroom, and the kitchen. God cares about every aspect, every corner, every dark crevice of this earth. And it's oftentimes in your work where you're spending most time that you and I have an opportunity to say, God, come. Have your way in this work. Have your way in me. How would you have me go about my work? How would you help me navigate the seasons in between work? How would you help me when I hate my job? How would you help me stay grounded when I love my job and I'm finding all things in it? Over and over and over again, God is wanting to work with us. So what does this actually look like? Lester DeCoster says, work is the form in which we make ourselves useful to others. If we just try to boil all of this down, you know who work is not for? You. You are not the end-all, be-all benefactor. Yeah, you know. Just stop benefiting from your work, okay? I'm just kidding. You are not the ultimate end-all, be-all of your work. Work is a place in which the goodness of God towards us is moving through us. It's something to be received and taken on so that it can benefit others. Now, it can be hard to see that sometimes. When you're at a desk pushing papers, you might wonder, how is this meaningful? You could look at jobs like doctors and nurses and parents, and you look at these ones that kind of actually have these means that look like, oh man, they are serving people. They're doing the work. But when you're in the back corner, when you're cleaning the halls, when you're doing the random things that no one sees, is that meaningless? Is that less meaningful than others? God would say no, because he is the one that has created, and then he is filling it so that it can participate in the ultimate goodness. The baker doesn't just make bread, she feeds the city. The sanitation worker doesn't just collect garbage, he protects public health. Frederick Buechner says, the place God calls you to is the place where your deepest gladness and the world's deep hunger meet. Do you know that can happen when you don't have a job? Do you know that can happen when you hate your job? Do you know that can happen when you're doing something you don't really feel fit for? Do you know that can happen when job isn't going the way in which you want it to? Over and over again, you and I can have a higher calling. This is what we would call vocation. That there's actually a deep intrinsic build in each of us that no matter our job or scenario, we can actually be participating in something that is benefiting other people. We were at the Grizzlies home opener last week, and there was 2 bounce houses in this kids area for kids to go and play with by the splash pads. And at some point, someone made a comment. There was an older gentleman sitting in a chair running one of the bounce houses. And the shoes were tidied up. The kids were in line. He's interacting with them. They're interacting with him. He's having a blast. I bet you that's not his dream job. an older gentleman who's probably nearing retirement, sitting at a Grizzlies game next to a bounce house, getting paid minimum wage. I bet you, I don't know, I didn't ask him. I bet you that's not his ideal situation. But what was he doing with it? He was blessing those that were there. He was working the job that was in front of him. And I would offer that he was actually benefiting other people. He was looking at a need that the world has, and he had a joy and a passion to see other kids come to life in this. And that is something that every single one of us could do. So, is this not the creational structure of God, to work on behalf of others? All of God's work in the beginning is for the benefit of whom? Us, his people. He models what it looks like for you and I to work. It's to be generous. If you want to find a way to find meaning in your work again, honestly, do the generosity practice coming up in a couple weeks. Like 4 weeks, you actually spend time thinking through, how can I be generous, influential, and what happens, you'll find more joy and contentment in your life. Multiple ways to be generous in your life. I would offer that you can think through that no matter your context currently. So, finance. What's the creational structure? Stewardship. God gave humanity resources to manage for the flourishing of families and communities. That's the original design. Yes, finance gets twisted into greed and exploitation, but the structure underneath, stewarding resources for human good. Law, what's the structure? Justice. God cares about protecting the vulnerable, establishing what's right, creating space that's woven in the fabric of creation. Yes, law gets twisted into power games and bureaucracy, but the original structure, justice and shalom. Technology, what's the structure? Extending human capacity. We're made in God's image as creators and problem solvers. Technology is about taking raw materials and making tools that heal, connect, and serve. Yes, it gets twisted into addiction and control, but the structure? Creativity that serves human flourishing. The arts, what's the structure? Beauty that points to the Creator. God made a world that's not just functional but beautiful. The arts awaken wonder, tell truth, and stir the imagination towards transcendence. Yes, they can be twisted into self-glorification and escapism, but the structure? Beauty that reflects the beauty of God. Parenting, what's the creational structure? Formation. God didn't just create life, he formed it, named it, called it good. Parenting is one of the most direct participations in this act, shaping an image bearer towards flourishing. Yes, it gets twisted in control, performance, absence, but the structure underneath, human formation. Between jobs, what's the creational structure? Dignity that precedes the job. Work flows from who you are, made in the image of a working God. Your worth isn't contingent on whether someone is currently paying you for it. Yes, unemployment gets twisted into shame and identity tied to output, but the structure underneath, you were an image bearer before you had a title. Manual labor, what's the creation structure? Mastery over the physical world. God shaped the earth before he filled it. Jesus spent 30 years working with his hands. Manual labor is the most direct echo of the Genesis act, taking raw material and making something ordered and useful. Yes, it gets twisted into exploitation and low status, but the structure underneath, craftsmanship, God did that first. We could keep going. So I wonder this morning, have you recognized the actual structural components that God has created in your work? What benefit is there? What do you get to do in partnering with him for the greater good of others? And what has been lost in between? Where has it gotten twisted? Where is it not what it was intended to be? And where might God actually want to redeem you and your work? Help you reimagine what it looks like to participate in his creation, his creating, and his tending to that creation. I'm going to invite the worship team up. Dorothy Sayers says that the only Christian work is good work. Well done. Good work, well done. Is there bad work? Yes. There is bad work. You can choose work that causes harm and exploitation of self or of others. There is bad work. But there is much more good work. And if you and I can put our hands to that good work and do a good job, that's a way in which we glorify God in our work, that we actually consider our work as a place of worship. What can quickly happen is, again, you see your job as lesser. Doesn't mean as much. Maybe it's not spiritually astute enough. You're not doing something that looks completely like that. But what I want us to walk away with this week, no matter what you do, what if you just went and did a good job at it? If you're in between jobs, hunt for a job well. If you hate your job, just go do it good before you go do it poorly. If you don't like the people, go and be kind to them. Bless them. What if you just went and did good work this week? My last story, and we can start moving in. You guys got to play me off here. David Cronin, this goes all the way back to February 24th, 1989. United Airlines was on a flight coming back from Hawaii, and the actual door to the plane ripped off. 9 people were sucked out immediately. If you have a fear of flying, you don't like this story. And as that happens, the debris of the door hits 2 engines. They go out. So now they're 100 miles from their destination, and he has to find a way to get people back safely. He's got to start thinking through the airspeed and the rudders and the pressure and all the things that he normally doesn't have to think too hard about. Luckily, he had 38 years of experience in doing this, and he was just working through all the issues over and over again. It made no sense for him to land this plane, and yet it was one of the smoothest landings that the crew recalled ever happening. It was afterwards that they interviewed him and asked, what went through your mind when the cargo door blew open? And he said, I said a prayer for my passengers momentarily and then got back to business. And was that not the best way of living fully into his work for the betterment of other people? Was to do a good job. My last quote from Dorothy Sayers. The church's approach to an intelligent carpenter is usually to make him a good Christian and leave his carpentry alone. Whereas what the church should be telling him is this, that the very first demand that his religion makes upon him is that he should make good tables. How about that? What does it look like for you to go and make a good table this week? And what if you just trusted that to the Lord and said, God, what would you do with this table that I can't? I'll do my part. Then may you do yours. And so I just want to pause for a second before we sing this song and stand. And I realize that this hits everyone differently in this room. Our prayer team's going to come up, need at least a couple of you up here today after we sing together. And I think there's a few things that came up as I was preparing for this. I think one obvious one is those who are in between work. We just love to pray for you. We just ask God to come and bless you, to bring provision, to bring a job, to also help sustain you and to bring peace in the in-between, to remind you of your dignity and humanity. It's not tied to a job, having one or not having one. So we just love to pray for you, ask God to come near. I think some of you, you have like an ability to make money. There's just something about your career choice, your wiring, who you are. Like you just can make a lot of money. And I think Christians should make a lot of money. And I think Christians should give a lot of it away. And so may we, as we make more, we become more and more generous, and we actually follow the design that God has implemented to just give things away. And so we would love to bless you and to ask your heart also to be protected, because the more you make, the easier it is to fall in love with it. And we want your heart to be soft. God wants that actually to pass through you. And then the third one was those that just, you hate your job. You hate your job. And it's starting to seep. It's starting to not look good. It's starting to not be beneficial to you or those around you. And sometimes the quick resolve is to just get a different one. The answer is not here, it's elsewhere. But we believe that God is not waiting on the other side for you. He is with you now, and he wants to do a certain work now. And so we just want to invite him to come and just meet you in your job. So those are the three that came up. You might have some other things going on in your life that you'd love prayer for. But when the prayer team comes forward after that last song, as Andrew wraps us up, just come and receive prayer. Allow God to meet you in your work this week. If I can remind you one more time, what if understanding the deeper theological framework of how God has invited you and I to work, what if this week all you did was just do a good job? That will bless those around you. And I believe in return that'll bless you. So why don't we stand together and sing, and Andrew will come up and close us in just a minute.